Hello, my name is Xavier Barnard. This is the 8th supplemental video for a little retrospective I'm putting together the years running pervertedjustice.com, which fellow olds might know as the website that created the show To Catch a Predator on Dateline NBC. Today, we're heading back in time, the destination, summer 2005, to a suburb of Washington, D.C., specifically Herndon, Virginia, in Fairfax County, and taking a look at how the second Dateline episode, the first one to actually be called To Catch a Predator, came to be. Unlike Bethpage, New York, this one saw a decent amount of issues behind the scenes on the lead up to the sting that, in my opinion, really held it back. Also, unlike Bethpage, I'm splitting this up into two videos. This is part 1, which will focus on the aforementioned issues of Dateline behind the scenes, as well as the publicity going into the show airing, and the organizational viewpoint of the show itself afterwards. If you're just wanting to watch the videos of the sting itself, or some of the interviews promoting the airing, use the chapter links in the description to skip my various extremely granular kvetching sessions. That's what those links are there for. The second Dateline sting was one that I was initially very excited for, as you can tell from the screenshot on screen. As Dateline had agreed with my request to do it by Washington, D.C. My hope was for us to nab a politician, or at least someone that worked closely with one. That didn't end up happening, unfortunately, but what we did pull in definitely made headlines and waves. But oh, it could have been so much more. This sting would end up opening a lot of doors for us. Well, only after we brawled with the Fairfax County, Virginia Police Department in the media, of course. It's been interesting going back and reliving all of these things from back in the day. Just nothing was easy. Nothing. When I laid out a general outline of the story of the organization back in 2019, when I first thought about putting together a retrospective, the main thing I knew was what the title would be. A long friggin' fight. This thing in some ways was a perfect little encapsulation of why there's no title that fits better. Everything was a fight. Almost none of it should have been. But that's the aftermath of the show airing, which will be the focus of part 2, along with details about the guys that showed, that didn't show, and that we weren't allowed to send to the house. But what about this video? What about the details prior to the sting itself? Hey man, I'm glad you asked. Prior to this thing, the issue was mainly with Dateline having way too much control. If you watched my video on the Bethpage, New York sting, you might remember the comment I highlighted from the main Dateline producer for these things, Lynn Keller, where she let the mask flip a bit regarding some of the guys we had show up to the New York sting. On screen is the screenshot of Frag reporting on talking to Keller after the New York sting had aired, and the comments she made about the choices they did in editing, about what they had aired. The comment that made most of us very livid was the whole, that the younger ones didn't deserve the tremendous amount of humiliation that is coming for those that are featured. Of course, the younger ones were basically anyone under the age of 30. At the time, I had just turned 25 myself and had started the website at 23 years old. So you can imagine just how well that went over with me at the time. The very idea that, a 27-year-old arriving for a 14-year-old was somehow just the activity of a stupid kid was one of those things where, when you write it out, as I've just done, you can't help but say to yourself, what in the ever-loving motherfuck? In the edit of the media things is where the opinions of viewers get formed. And if you only show older folks showing up, it removes the understanding of the overall pervasiveness of the problem. By curating only this type of person arriving or that type of person arriving, it otherizes the problem. As in, people then see the show, and suddenly it's a problem, but their problem. So if you only show older guys, people assume it's just an issue with older guys. If you only show younger, they assume that it's an issue with only younger guys. If you focus too heavily on homosexual-oriented predators at a larger clip over heterosexual-oriented predators, then that becomes the other that people will blame. Human beings also want to say, well, yes, this is a problem, but it's a they problem, not a we problem. It's a trick of coping compartmentalization regarding the problems humanity has, and goes way beyond just the issue of sexual assault. This was a problem with the show constantly from my view, and that Dateline in the editing room would focus on the edge cases far more than the normie cases. This leads the viewer to go, oh well, that's the type. When the only type there was, the only real commonality among all the guys we sent to these houses, was that they're guys. Without showing the 23-year-old college kid wanting to horribly assault a 13-year-old, and only showing older guys, viewers get the impression that you can look and see the type of guy that does this, when in reality, the problem was beyond widespread among all types of males. And in no sting was this more of a problem than the Fairfax, Virginia sting. Fragg's elaboration on the details of the Herndon sting shortly after the initial announcement throws cold water on the entire operation. On screen was Fragg's follow-up post with more details about the upcoming sting. It set off a small firestorm immediately. Fragg was a great guy overall, so when I talk about this situation, it's not to say that Fragg wasn't solid as fuck overall. He was. I elevated him to my right hand for a reason. He and I agreed on most everything when it came to operations. In almost all cases, we were on the same page throughout his run with the website. He carried out what I asked. I grew to trust him and gave him equal responsibilities eventually. This was the first time I had a serious disagreement with something he wrote. My view was that he was drinking the Dateline Kool-Aid a bit with some of those comments. But rather than blow it up with some big disagreement publicly, I decided to put on the disappointed reaction to see if any contributors backed my viewpoint. I write my initial response in this way on screen now. A general delay to that without trying to stoke up an outright revolt among our volunteers. It's a fine line. You want to rally support for your viewpoint, but at the same time, you don't want to inflame volunteers to the point where people decide to refuse to work this thing completely. You might be thinking, geez, that was a muted reply, but volunteers knew exactly what I was driving at. The entire idea that we were going to focus on the more dangerous and sick types of predators was an anathema to what we had preached publicly. My reply shifts the mood about the upcoming sting, as intended, without having to be too aggressive about it. Fragg is no dummy and comes back with his viewpoint on it, which is above. He also knows me well enough by this point to know exactly what I'm doing with my reply. We talked about it privately, and he agreed with me that it was an untenable amount of restrictions. My opinion at this point is that we'll do this sting, and it'll be the last one we do with Dateline. Had the location not been exactly where I really wanted us to work for maximum impact, the Washington, D.C. area, I likely would have canceled this thing outright after hearing of these restrictions. But the D.C. area was just too sweet to pass up. The laws across the country needed to be strengthened, and there was no better location to make that clear than the D.C. suburbs. Chat contributor J Alternative seizes on my signal about these restrictions to press the point directly with Fragg. Their back and forth tells the rest of our chat contributors that they can also feel free to speak up, and many of them take the opportunity to do so. Fragg starts pushing back on Keller and her ilk as much as he can, and privately we all agree this will be the last Dateline unless we find an avenue to wrest control back over who gets sent to the house from Dateline. Now, at this point, you might be wondering why I'm belaboring this aspect of the run-up to the sting operation, other than what I had said earlier about making sure things can't be otherized by people watching the show. I also know that the biggest impact isn't in getting this interview or that interview, but showing the scope and totality of the problem. With these restrictions on us, we end up pulling 19 guys over 2 days. Are those good numbers? Sure. But what I know, and that you don't know, is that we could have pulled 30 to 50 without Dateline fucking with us. Let me guess. You might think that I'm full of shit, or perhaps just willfully lying. How could I know that we would have pulled at least double the amount of guys to the house? Well, here, let me show you, because baby, I like bringing receipts. The above screenshot was a partial list of guys we were working during the sting, to a point where we wanted feedback or more information on their details. Almost all of them having given their phone numbers, or at the point where we might need to do a phone verification. It's long. Very long. However, it's not even comprehensive. Quite a few contributors working this thing weren't compiled into this particular list. The list would likely be at least a third longer if I went through our backstage research areas. Most of those names would have shown without the restrictions we had put upon us by Dateline for this thing. We would have blown the doors off of that house had our hands not been tied. So if you ever thought, geez, they pulled 50 in Riverside, California just 5 months later, shocked that the DC area was so many fewer. Fact is, the DC area wasn't fewer at all. The difference, of course, being that the Fairfax County sting was the first and last one, where we had to listen to Dateline's guidelines of who to send to the house. Their restrictions turned this sting, which was still quite a sensation, into a real missed opportunity to truly wake the country up in terms of the scope and depth of the problem. Further compounding the issue was that Dateline had hired a researcher pointlessly. What Dateline didn't know is that between the first thing we did with them and the second one, we created an entire hidden research team called AFU, which stood for Advanced Follow-Up. Yes, it was a completely silly term if you thought about it too much, I know. Regardless, our researchers were something we kept beyond close to the vest. We didn't even tell Dateline that they existed. Our hidden research team was a crack squad, and I don't mean on crack. They were the crack, the straight dope, so good. It was one of the biggest improvements we ever made to our operations to create this area. So Dateline hires this researcher, who wasn't a bad evil guy or anything, just kind of useless. Because for him to get real details, he'd need their real name to put into the databases that he was using. Yeah, think about that one for a second. Dateline is relying on this guy for advanced details to schedule guys to the house. He's relying on us for the real names so he can find more details. Now, most of the time, we had already found out all those details ourselves with our own research team, making him beyond superfluous. It added another layer of complexity to everything, with us having to feed details to this guy. Then he gives that information to the producers, who sign off on guys being scheduled. Dateline producers were never smart enough to just ask themselves, hey, how is Perverted Justice getting all this information about these guys to even give to our own researcher? And then there was the house. Yeah, I'm on full bitchfest mode. I've never bitched about this shit publicly for almost 20 years, so excuse me while I vent like an old rusty teapot that's been on the stove for far too long. The Herndon house was problematic on a couple levels. First, it was very nice and very expensive. That always caused issues when creating your character and backstory as a chat decoy. If the house is too damn nice, you need a reason and story about why your house is so fucking nice, where your parents are, etc. Some predators get sketched off if you have a house that's too nice, as they're looking for vulnerable poor kids, or kids with a lower socioeconomic background, as they feel it's safer than some affluent kid. However, the problems with the house went beyond it being a bit too nice. Googling the address, I found that it came up as being owned by an old investigative company, which used to be run by the guy that owned the house. Yeah, an old investigative company. That's not good. Dateline had made a deal with him for the house, much like they had made a deal in New York with a family to use theirs. Cutting corners, basically, instead of renting a vacant house. We had a few guys, once we gave them the address, suddenly ghost on us. Dollars to donuts, they likely Googled the address and were sketched out. Again, not to be a big, gigantic bitch boy about Dateline, but come on, make our lives easier, for fuck's sake. But let's just pile on the issues. All gas, no brakes. As things progress and we get closer to the first day of the house being open, the issues previously identified about Dateline's restrictions being onerous and stupid pop up once Bragg and Dell are actually in the house itself. The researcher is clueless and causes all sorts of issues trying to argue with the data we were generating on these guys. Sometimes coming up with absolutely incorrect information that almost caused Dateline to try to cancel a couple guys that showed up. Our researcher team was right. This guy was wrong. Dell literally lit into him at the house at one point, as noted in the screenshot above. Additionally, Frag is there in the house and having to pore over our chats in the AFU to try to thumbs up guys for the house, while having to battle with Dateline producers about the particulars about each person he's giving approval to be sent. Do you think I'm done? Oh no, I'm not done. Adding on to everything else I've already bitched about, this was a second sting where they also hamstrung us on the days of the house being open. People who watched my supplemental video about the Bethpage sting got to learn that it was a friggin' Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday sting operation, which turned into just the Monday and Tuesday, as Dateline had more than enough over those 2 days that they canceled the Wednesday. Pulling guys during work hours during the week is much harder than a weekend sting, but Dateline didn't want to have to pay their people to work weekends at the time. I know, that sounds insane, but it's true. So, did they learn from that when planning out the Herndon sting? Of course fucking not. Of course not. Herndon was scheduled to be a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday sting operation. Of course, like Bethpage, they ended up canceling most of the Friday part of the sting as they had enough footage for their purposes after just 2 days. This, as well, caused a lot of agita among us. We knew midway through day 2 that Dateline would want to close up shop early on the Friday. We did our best to schedule as many as we could so we could try to keep the house open for the Friday and have even more guys show up. However, with John Kenley scheduling his McDonald's arrival and Dateline chomping at the bit to not even do the third day to begin with, we knew we were going to have to turn some guys around. We hated doing that. We hated it with a fucking passion. But this sting was Dateline at their highest level of control over these sting operations. So when they want to shut down, precious little we could do about it. To me, it was beyond myopic on their part, and even they would come to regret it when this sting airs and blows up huge. More footage, more predators, always better from a TV perspective. I was gobsmacked back then, they didn't understand that. When even a schlubby bub like 26-year-old me at the time understood it quite well. The main reason that Dateline even did any of the scheduled Friday arrivals was because of Joe Wonderler, aka VA Male, being scheduled for that day. Without him, the sting would have likely ended on Thursday night, and we likely never get John Kenley's second arrival at the McDonald's. Now, for a brief interlude. You might notice a theme about my comments regarding Dateline NBC. Yeah, you just might notice that. Yes, I know what you're probably thinking. I bitch a lot about Dateline and their producers. You have to remember a couple of things. For us, this Virginia thing is about sending a message to Washington, D.C. and the country about how bad this problem is. We're not doing all this work so they can fill an hour of TV and can cut out early to their fancy homes to get a long weekend. We're there to fucking work and produce. To try to do some good in regards to the issue of sexual predators online trying to assault kids. We had put in work in the chat rooms for almost a month prior to the house opening to prepare for all of this. So getting waylaid by stupid age restrictions that make no sense. Getting the house shut down earlier when Friday nights are prime time for getting guys to arrive. Remember, we're not paid by Dateline for the Virginia sting. We weren't paid by Dateline for the first thing either, nor were we paid for the Riverside sting to follow. So when Dateline producers then try to boss us around like we're fucking employees, we were not their employees. We did not work for them. They didn't quite seem to understand that. They didn't appreciate the work we were doing in the way that they should have, that we were doing it for free. That was my viewpoint then, still is my viewpoint today. They didn't appreciate the gift they were given by us. They took our work for granted. This isn't something I realized a decade later. I knew it then, and I was already plotting when the house wrapped about how to flip the power structure should they want to do a third installment. Hamstrung by the days they picked, hamstrung by the restrictions they put on who they wanted to be scheduled, hamstrung by the researchers, hamstrung by everything. Still, pulled 19 over essentially 2 days. If you were thinking I was being hyperbolic about how many we could have pulled, hopefully by now you understand I'm not exaggerating. We would have easily done 40 people without their whack-ass restrictions, and had it been a proper weekend sting, we would have hit 50. Hansen in interviews, specifically his Today Show interview promoting the show that I'm going to include later in this video, opined that we could have done 70. That's an exaggeration in my view, but it shows that even Hansen himself knew that we'd only scratched the surface with this sting operation. Despite even Chris Hansen knowing that we had only scratched the surface, the sting was an absolute success from Dateline's point of view. From my point of view, it was a gigantic missed opportunity to really pound home the scale of the problem to legislators in D.C. and to people nationally. The Herndon sting still managed to create a ridiculous amount of attention towards the problem, but it could have been so much bigger and illustrative of the need for new laws nationally, resources for law enforcement to catch up to the scale of the issue, and general knowledge for the public to know exactly how pervasive the problem was. So, now that I've just bitched for 30 paragraphs in a row, yeah, you bet your ass I counted them, why was the sting a success, despite all the issues I just went on about? Well, the Bethpage sting in New York with Dateline was over a year prior, around 15 months earlier. What Dateline doesn't know at the time of the Herndon sting is that we were a completely different organization in August of 2005 than we had been in March of 2004. We did not fuck around between those two sting operations. We refined everything about how we did our work. First, we had about double the amount of chat decoy contributors for Herndon than we had for Bethpage. You might be thinking to yourself, that's weird. You got the same number of guys, though. And yeah, because Dateline hamstrung us in terms of who we could send. Come on, nerdling. I already covered that, like 30 paragraphs. After the Bethpage New York sting, we're talking 15 months of us finding and promoting the best people possible. As the screenshot above shows, I was very happy with the quality of our chat decoys in summer of 2005. I would not have said the same thing in March of 2004. Dateline not understanding the amount of work and expansion we had put into our operations was likely the reason they were trying to be so controlling in Herndon. Their lawyers, after all, were corporate lawyers. Their bosses were corporate bosses. Those types of people are always too stupid to realize when they're working against their own self-interest. Technologically, we had created the proxy server for Yahoo Instant Messenger, which was a game changer all the way around. The proxy server was a piece of software that a volunteer going by the handle DMO had created for us. For you modern types, here in 2025, it was basically a centralized VPN that we routed all of our chats through on Yahoo, allowing us to record them not only on the chat decoy computer, but also on a centralized computer that we owned as an organization. both recording in real time. This means to claim that a chat was faked, you'd also have to claim that we, at the same time, faked it on our central recording server. This might not seem like a big deal to someone with access to 2025 technology, but it was a real big deal back in 2004 and 2005. It was our proprietary tool, and it fixed so many problems that we could have run into otherwise. The proxy server also allowed us to create a script that we could use to do lookups on the people we were chatting with as well. It would quickly query our proxy server database and spit out if anyone else had talked to the username being searched. Again, you in 2025 might be scoffing, but brother, you had no idea how great a piece of technology this was for us back then. Being able to make sure we avoided double working individuals ensured that we wouldn't be tripping over each other. It was a crucial advancement for us. End of the day, the organization we were in 2005 was miles ahead of where we were in 2004. In Dateline's defense, they didn't know that. In Dateline's non-defense, they should have known that. More than anything, though, and I cannot stress this enough, so guess what? I'm just going to repeat myself. I had assembled a lineup of chat decoy volunteers that were straight killers. They were fresh. They were dynamic. They were ready. They hadn't burned out yet and self-detonated. The crew I had in August 2005 is nasty compared to what I had in March of 2004. Of course, what we end up going into Riverside with in January of 2006 is even better. But I cannot give my people in August 2005 enough praise. We had seasoned, experienced, dedicated people, and I had them in the best positions to do good work. That is why Herndon came out the way it did, despite all of the best efforts of Dateline to get in the way with stupidity. The calendar for day one of the sting is on screen now. This was the scheduling we did for it, along with who showed. For the first day, we had 10 scheduled, and out of those, 8 arrived. David K. arriving first really started the sting on a positive note, because as you can imagine, that was a very exciting piece of footage from the Dateline perspective. K's arrival and confrontation started the sting off with a real bang for Dateline. That he arrived at 11 a.m. on a friggin' Wednesday is something that I think most people do not realize about him. Del Harvey, back in the day, did a very detailed write-up of the first day at the Herndon sting, with details from her perspective inside the house. Extra details on the guys that arrived, so all our contributors would be able to read them, help bolster their morale, and let everyone in our organization know what was going on inside the house itself. Her write-ups, when she did them, were always great and is well worth a read. I highly encourage you to pause the video and give it a read if you're interested in what were essentially real-time behind-the-scenes details. Day 2's calendar is on screen. More no-shows on Day 2 than Day 1. Here you can see that John Kennelly, aka Special Guy 29, aka Naked Dude, was such a fast mover that we didn't even get him on the schedule for his first appearance on the show. With Kennelly counted, we had 9 show on the second day, and 5 no-show. That for us was a fairly bad percentage. But again, you're talking about pulling guys in on a Thursday. Always going to have more complications during the work week versus things that were done over a weekend. This is the Day 3 calendar. Again, you don't see John Kennelly listed because, again, he was a super fast mover. His chats took no time at all, and Dateline was very excited to see if he'd show up at that McDonald's. Again, if you had listened to the long bitch fest I already laid out, look at when the house closes. We could have had another 5 hours. We would have banked more guys. Between Dateline 1 in Bethpage, New York, and Dateline 2 in Herndon, Virginia, we had a total of 0 weekend nights, not even a Friday night. Still, we pulled insane quality in Virginia. But again, it's an example that we could have done a lot more. The higher-ups at NBC loved the episode before it was aired, to the point that they sent Chris Hansen around to do some pre-show publicity, advertising the show for later that night. One segment that our forum readers had a very strong reaction to was an appearance on the Today Show, the morning that this thing would air. In it, show host Katie Couric would interview Chris Hansen after a short teaser trailer segment. And she starts off with a question that riled our forum members up pretty good.
Your life.
But first, Matt, it's estimated that at any given time there are 50,000 computer predators online looking to hook up with children. In a moment, you'll meet some of them face to face. Dateline NBC rented a house in a suburb of Washington, D.C., outfitted it with hidden cameras, computers, and decoys, and waited for the knock on the door. Here's Dateline's Chris Hansen.
As part of our undercover investigation, we enlisted the help of a sort of vigilante organization called Perverted Justice. Its volunteers pose as 12, 13, and 14-year-old boys and girls in AOL and Yahoo chat rooms, trying to expose adults who solicit them for sex. Our decoys are hit up almost immediately, and it wasn't long before men started showing up at our house. Altogether, 19 in 3 days. If that number doesn't shock you, what some of these men do for a living certainly will. This man is a special education teacher. Our decoy is now posing as a 13-year-old boy named Brandon the teacher is expecting to meet.
Just sit at the kitchen counter for a minute.
Where are you? Oh, okay.
I need to get my new shorts on.
Okay.
The teacher is 54 and married. When I confront him, at first he says he thought Brandon was an adult.
Well, you said he was 23. What's the problem?
I have the transcript. That's what the problem is. Brandon said he was 13.
13?
13.
And the teacher knows this because Brandon told him online.
You will talk about all the different things that you'd like to do with him. What are you doing here?
I thought I would come see him, but...
Come see him for what?
I wanted to meet him.
What is a 54-year-old man doing coming to this home to see a 13-year-old boy?
I obviously made a big mistake.
And he wasn't the only one. This man thought he'd had a sexually charged chat online with a 13-year-old boy, a boy he thinks he's about to meet.
Hello?
Hi.
Hey, hold on a second. I gotta change my shirt. Yeah.
Okay.
It's still day. I gotta ask, you still gonna be up for tonight?
We'll see.
So how can I help you? What are you doing here?
Not something good. This isn't good.
Not good. I think that's kind of an understatement, isn't it? What do you do for a living?
A rabbi.
That's right, a rabbi.
Now, presumably, you counsel families and children in your position as a rabbi.
Sure.
What are you doing as a man of God, as a rabbi, in this house, trying to meet a 13-year-old boy?
Instead of answering, the rabbi asks to know who I am. But before I tell him, I want to ask him about some obscene pictures he sent our decoy.
You sent pornographic pictures. Okay, that's a federal offense right there.
Okay, look. You know I'm in trouble, and I know I'm in trouble. I am not interested in getting any further in trouble.
The rabbi and virtually every other man who showed up claimed it was the first time they had ever done something like this and wouldn't actually have had sex with a minor.
Yeah. The rabbi called us several times during the investigation claiming he'd done nothing wrong. He's since resigned from the organization where he worked. Tonight on Dateline, you'll see other prominent men who came to the house, and you'll hear from a psychologist about why they did it and from an expert on how to protect your children. Katie?
You know, just watching that, it sort of makes you sick to your stomach because you, in some ways, feel terrible for these men that they got themselves in this situation. I mean, obviously what they did was terribly wrong,
Well, you'll hear from a psychologist tonight who explains this compulsion and this internet addiction. But I've got to tell you, we had 3 days in this house, and at the end of every night, every member of the crew was just physically and emotionally exhausted.
And it does make you sort of sick to your stomach. I can't believe they sat there, Chris, honestly,
well,
and agreed to talk to you about it. I mean, most people, wouldn't they just get up and run away?
We had 19 men come to the house in 3 days. Probably could have done 70. Some men did run. But when they come in, I don't say who I am right away. I just say, come in, I'd like to talk to you. So some of the men think perhaps I'm an angry parent. Some think maybe I'm with law enforcement.
Right.
And it's not until a little further into the conversation that I say, I'm Chris Hansen, Dateline NBC. We're doing a story on computer predators.
So what's going to happen to these guys? Or do you give this information to the authorities and they press charges, or what? The
computer watchdog group, Perverted Justice, has already provided the names and the chat logs of these men to the local authorities. They're now investigating, and we believe we'll hear something not too long after the story airs tonight.
And I know you and I both have kids who are constantly on the computer, and it really, really is scary. So you're going to have some advice for parents.
Absolutely. And you know what's frightening now? You know, these kids have these blogs, and they're emptying their
so
souls
much personal information.
And all that is information for a potential predator. So you have to keep the lines of communication open. There are a number of other things you can do as well.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to your report in its entirety, Chris. Thanks so much.
Good
to see you. And you can see Chris's full report tonight on Dateline at 8, 7 Central, right here on NBC. And now let's go outside for a check of the weather from Al.
Oh, yeah. That brings back some memories. You know, just watching that, it really makes you sick to your stomach, because you, in some ways, feel terrible for these men that had got themselves in this situation. Nah, Katie, feeling sorry for these dudes arriving to assault 10 to 15-year-olds isn't really a logical viewpoint. She would later go on to make the same comment, essentially, in an interview with Chris Hansen prior to the Riverside sting airing just a few months later, that she felt humiliated for these men. So it wasn't like it was a one-off sentiment either, as the screenshot of our debate on the forums about her shows. Given that her initial reaction a decade later, when Matt Lauer's assault allegations are revealed, was to rush to console Matt Lauer, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised that she consistently expressed compassion and sadness for dudes caught in our stings way back when. It turned out to be a common sentiment in the media at the time, one that still bewilders me to this very day. She does, though, so the clip at the end Al Roker, which amuses me for the irony. Those who watched the Bethpage video know why. Should have been you, Al. Should have been you all along. The pre-show publicity across NBC's platforms was rather surprising to us. MSNBC's programs that day were laden with content about the show airing that night on Dateline. Just one such segment on the Abrams Report is pretty indicative of the coverage that aired all day. Chris Hansen, Del Harvey, and Frag have a chat with Dan Abrams promoting the story. If you watch this pre-show publicity, focus on Hansen's comments about Fairfax County law enforcement specifically. Let's call it foreshadowing for part 2. Dun, dun, dun.
Report with Dan Abrams on MSNBC.
It is many parents' greatest fear: online sexual predators. An estimated 50,000 of them are logged on at any given moment, searching for children to meet up with. It's a murky, dark underworld, but it seems those adults looking for children know exactly where to go. That's what Dateline NBC caught on tape. Decoys posing as teens online chatted with potential child predators. They rented a house in Washington, a D.C. suburb, outfitted it with hidden cameras and computers, and then waited for the knock on the door. Dateline NBC's Chris Hansen has the story.
The rabbi called us several times during our investigation, claiming he had done nothing wrong. Nevertheless, he has now stepped down from the Jewish youth organization where he once worked. The teacher you saw, he was fired after this information was given to the school district in Maryland where he worked. Tonight, you'll hear from many more prominent people in the community who got caught up in all this. You'll hear from a clinical psychologist who will take us inside these men's minds, and you'll hear from experts who will tell us all how to better protect our children. Dan?
Chris, these stories are so important, and you've done such a great job with this in years past as well. We should first point out that virtually all the men in this piece deny coming to the home for sex with an underage child.
Absolutely. And they, without exception, it's their first time. They really wouldn't have gone through with it.
And I should again just tease, you can see all of Chris's investigation, Dateline 8/7 Central on NBC. All right, so Chris, question one. I would think that some of these guys get angry. And I've asked you this before. I remember last year when you did this piece, I said, did any of these guys try and slug you?
Nobody actually took a poke, but when I told the rabbi who I was, and he started to get aggressive in terms of saying, who are you? I need to see some ID. And I said, well, you want to know who I am? He said, yeah, I do. I said, well, I'm Chris Hansen of Dateline NBC, and we're doing a story on computer predators. Now, I had just shown him a picture that he had sent to the decoy, a picture of himself naked, and so he came after me, and you'll see this tonight, I think just to try to get the picture back. He just kind of exploded with anger, and he started towards us, and once the security stepped in, he just turned around and he left.
Yeah, it's a good thing you're a big guy, Chris. I think that might help in some of the situations here. All right, and I assume a lot of these guys also just ran, right? There were a number who, you know, got to the door, saw me, and said, you know, that's it, I'm out of here, and they ran down the street. You can see this guy right here. A lot of them stayed to talk. You know, I didn't tell them who I was when they first walked in. I just said, you know, why don't you have a seat there? I want to talk to you about this. And the majority of them sat down, and obviously some thought I was a parent, some thought I might have been with law enforcement, some had kind of a little bit of recognition factor going, but they were so stunned that they didn't, you know, put two and two together until I told them who, you know, I actually was. Right, and in no cases did you say, I'm actually 13 and I look a lot older. So exactly. Right. Exactly. All right. There's a naked guy, a guy who came in and took off all his clothes? I thought I had seen just about everything. And you see it right there as I hand him the towel to cover himself up. There had been chat with the decoy indicating that maybe this was a possibility, so I had that towel on top of the refrigerator just in case. But we never thought he'd do it, and I was standing in the next room with the security guy and the other cameramen, and we had it up on a monitor, and here he comes. He cases out the place, walks into the garage, strips, and comes in. Now, the kicker to this, you know, we talked to him, he's embarrassed, he leaves. The very next day, Dan, he is online in a chat room talking to another decoy who is posing as a 13-year-old boy. He makes a date to meet this decoy at a McDonald's in suburban Virginia. I'm waiting there with the camera crew again, and I asked him, I said, you know, what are you doing here? I've never seen anything like this, twice in 2 days. So the question everyone's asking is, that guy and the rest of these guys, they getting prosecuted? Well, perverted justice, as a matter of routine, after they do something like this, turns over all the chat logs and other information to the local police. In this case, it's the Fairfax County Police Department. I interviewed the lieutenant who heads up the unit who handles these matters, who assured me that all of these cases are being investigated. And I have to believe that it won't be too long after the piece airs tonight that we'll hear, you know, if any of these guys are going to be prosecuted. All right, Chris, if you can just stay with us for a minute. Sure, as you said absolutely. In Chris's piece, you heard a young teen named Brandon talking in the background after the men came into the house saying he just needed to change his clothes. Brandon joins me now. So, Brandon, what kind of things would you say when these guys would talk on the phone or when they were in the house?
Basically, I would tell them that I was 13, that I was home alone, my parents were out of town, they were going to be gone for 4 or 5 days or 2 days or whatever the case may be. I would then essentially ramble about something completely inconsequential, which would inevitably convince them that I was a real kid because I had some of the stupidest topics of conversation you've ever heard.
When you hear the words inconsequential and inevitable, you probably realize that Brandon is not a 13-year-old. It's actually Del Harvey, who acted as a decoy to lure some of the men into the house. And also joining us is Perverted Justice's Assistant Director of Operations, who goes by the name of Frag. He was a contributor in the sting, meaning he posed as a 13-year-old girl and chatted with these guys online. You know, it seems, Del, that they do it again and again. I mean, you know, Chris does this story every year, and then you hear about the guy who gets caught, he gets naked, he gets caught, and he goes out and does it the next day.
It's absolutely habitual for a lot of these guys, which is why we've started making an increased push to really work with law enforcement, and why we started essentially working with law enforcement on every case that we can, because there's really nothing that can be done unless they're put into prison or they're put into counseling or something along those lines. It's just amazing how many people just don't seem to learn from what happens.
Frag, tell me about some of the experiences that you had. You were posing as a girl, and some of these guys, one guy actually came back to the house again?
Yes, actually, one of my busts, we had a quote-unquote date scheduled for around 10:30 in the evening, and he didn't make it, and we wrapped for the day and shut down the operation. And later that evening, the gentleman showed up, and the gentleman who answered the door, he asked for me, and he was just told he had the wrong address and went away. The next day, one of our female phone verifiers called up the predator again and gave him an excuse as to what the situation was and rectified it in his mind. Set up another date that night for 7 o'clock, and he showed up right on time and spoke with Chris. Or actually, he ran.
Do you show, Frag, do you ever just come there and say, hey, look, listen to this voice. This is what this is what you were talking to?
Listen to what voice?
Meaning your voice. I mean, meaning it's your voice that they had heard, to sort of confront them directly and say, hey, this is the voice you heard, and this is the face.
No, I've never confronted any of them directly. I was in the house during the operation upstairs. Let Chris handle the confrontations.
Yeah, and Del, apart from the work that you've been doing with Chris and Dateline, what is it that you guys are doing on a daily basis with this?
Well, essentially, we've really developed a lot of agreements with law enforcement at all levels across the nation. Last time we were on this show, last September actually, we had around 25 agreements with law enforcement agencies, and as of this taping, we have over 175, covering over 120 million people.
Wow. That's great.
And we've also picked up 31 convictions so far this year. So.
All right, well, that's good news. Chris, you get nervous when you're doing this? I'd get nervous if I were doing this. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you're always a little tense walking out. I mean, even though we have security and everything else, and we think we kind of know what makes these guys tick, Del and Frag are very good at that and kind of letting us know, okay, this is what we think this guy's all about. But yeah, you never really know who's walking in. I mean, we take a lot of precautions. For instance, you'll notice that there's a kitchen counter there, so there's something between the person coming in and myself. So if it did blow up or somebody pulled something, I mean, I could dance or get out of the way for a few minutes till, our security guy could get in the room. So it keeps you on your toes, that's for sure.
I'll bet. All right, Chris Hansen, Del Harvey, and Frag, thanks a lot. This is important stuff. And again, you can see it on Dateline tonight at 8 o'clock.
Frag was pretty awkward in that interview, but Del did a great job. For those who watched earlier videos in my supplemental series, you may remember my talking about wanting to find an older male and a younger female to be the faces of the organization for media interviews. How many of the early media pieces I've posted in prior videos were me experimenting with trying to find proper spokespeople. That I was too smarmy sounding. Imagine that. Me smarmy sounding? That's impossible. And too young a dude in general at the time, but fluff pieces like that overall. At this point, I'm pretty ecstatic with Del Harvey and Frag doing interviews like this, ones that are simply promoting a Dateline episode or talking in generalities about the website. My hope at this point in time, in late 2005, is that I'd be able to no longer have to do any media whatsoever. That we would, as an organization, get to the point where it's just a matter of explaining what we do, rather than dealing with fights and drama. That my role in having to go out and defend our work against attacks would eventually become obsolete. Well, let's call that foreshadowing as well for part 2 of the video. The hopes of 26-year-old me in November of 2005 were just a little too much to ask for. One other element I'm going to cover real quick is trying to give you a sense of how we geared up for the airing. Have to remember that again, we have basically no organizational income at this point. During the first Dateline, we got so crushed by the traffic that our public-facing forums were down for days. Days! So my friend Phoebus and I spent a year preparing, optimizing, getting a new server host to try to withstand what we know is going to be a crush of hits of the second Dateline airing. We had Del announce the Dateline episode to our public forum leaders and volunteers. I had teased at one of my regular state of the website addresses to the forum members a month and a half prior, but here Dell puts out the specific word to our people. This was part of my goal of elevating Dell and Frag in the eyes of our rank-and-file volunteers, so they understood that I was putting them up there on my level in terms of authority. So people understood that we were transitioning away from my Stalin-style leadership into a three-headed administration triumvirate. Meanwhile, I'm laying out instructions to our highest-level volunteers in private, making sure they know what to look out for when this thing airs. I'm especially concerned ahead of time over the rabbi, as I don't want a bunch of fucking Nazis rolling into the forum with lame anti-Semitic nonsense. We weren't a bougie, expensive university in 2024, after all, so anti-Semitism wasn't welcome in our house. Also laid out new directives about friendliness and squelching talk of idiot pro-pedophile hater websites that people would all too often go on and on about. On screen now is my note to public forum members about elements we were temporarily removing and measures we were taking to try to survive Hurricane Dateline. My IT guy and best friend, Phoebus, and I had gone through and stripped down the forums and main page to draw as little from my SQL databases as possible. We worked up the main page to use a static refresh that was entirely cached and not drawing raw from the database. I turned off and modded our forums to use as few queries as possible. So, all that pre-sting blather aside, now that we're all battened down for Hurricane Dateline at this point in the video, here's the 42-minute-long, slightly upscaled episode that aired originally way back on November 4th of 2005.
You're only 13?
Yeah.
That's rape.
What are you doing trying to meet a 13-year-old boy?
So you thought it was okay to come here to see a 14-year-old girl?
What are you doing here? Could you explain yourself?
Come on, girl. You've got to stop this.
Tonight, a Dateline undercover investigation to catch a predator. The men you just saw were all trolling internet chat rooms trying to meet up with an underage teenager. Good evening, I'm Stone Phillips.
And I'm Ann Curry. It's a dangerous side of the internet, one that's growing, and many children are at risk. So we went undercover, filling a house with hidden cameras, and soon a long line of visitors came knocking, expecting to find a young teenager they'd been chatting with on the internet home alone.
Instead, they found Dateline. We want to warn you that some of what you'll see tonight is explicit, but parents need to know what their kids can confront when they sit down at the computer. Chris Hansen has our Dateline hidden camera investigation.
You're watching respected members of the community who have a secret, a potentially criminal secret involving the possible sexual exploitation of children.
Hello? Knock, knock. I can come in? Where are you? Hello?
They think they're headed for a clandestine meeting with a 12, 13, or 14-year-old.
Hello?
Hi.
Hey, hold on a second. I gotta change my shirt, yeah?
Okay.
They think a child is home alone.
Where are you? Oh, okay.
I need to get my new shorts on.
Okay.
Tonight, a Dateline hidden camera investigation will explore how some men use the internet to attempt to meet children, apparently for sex.
Did you bring condoms?
Yeah.
The problem seems to be getting worse, and the profile of the suspected predators more frightening. Just this past summer, an editor for Weekly Reader, a newspaper for school children, was arrested for using the internet to solicit sex with a 14-year-old boy. He pleaded not guilty. And this past spring, a New York City cop, a youth officer, was also caught attempting to meet a child online for sex. He pleaded guilty last month to attempted use of a child in a sexual performance and agreed to serve 6 months in prison. Law enforcement officials estimate that 50,000 predators are online at any given moment, and the number of reports of children being solicited for sex is growing, says Michelle Collins of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
1 in 5 kids has been sexually solicited, and in many cases the incidents are actually aggressive, where the person on the other end of the computer is actually calling the child, sending things to their homes, or actually trying to meet them in person.
That's the best thing about
chatting seems unthreatening to them, so they lower their guard.
Her organization launched an ad campaign aimed at educating teens about this crime.
Meeting them is the goal.
The message that really got home to the teenage girls was that if you're in an online relationship, there's a good chance you might be getting played.
And Collins says young teens are often an easy target.
Teenagers have vulnerabilities. It just ups the ante when you bring it onto the World Wide Web and that many more people have access to knowing what's going on inside a child's mind.
Katie Couric is a perfect example. She recounts her story in the book A Girl's Life Online.
I was a 13-year-old girl. I was a bit curious about the opposite sex.
Katie began an internet relationship with a 23-year-old, an older man who convinced her he shared many of her interests.
In my mind, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like, this is my soulmate out there. In actuality, he was just learning my interests, probably researching them at the same time, to come back to say that he enjoyed those things too.
After months of chatting online, Katie finally agreed to a meeting at a hotel where she was competing in a swim meet. The man turned out to be 41, and although they had never talked about sex, there was little doubt that's what he had in mind.
He leaned over, he kissed me, he groped me, he touched other parts of my body. I mean, essentially was molested.
Since then, Katie, now 23, has become an advocate for internet victims. She warns children to steer clear of internet predators and says she's heard thousands of tragic stories from victims who did not.
You could never put us in a room. I'm not even sure if you could put us all in a whole stadium. I think it's very, very widespread.
And even though tough laws don't seem to deter many of these predators, Lieutenant Jake Jacoby of the Fairfax County Police Department says it's a crime in Virginia for an adult to use the internet to entice a child into having sex.
So merely by using the internet to set up a sexual liaison with somebody who's underage, that's a felony?
Yes, it is.
Because so many children are at risk, and to demonstrate the disturbing reality of what goes on in some chat rooms, we enlisted the help of volunteers from a vigilante organization called Perverted Justice. Volunteers of this controversial group are experts at pretending to be children online in order to catch and expose potential predators. And in most states, soliciting a minor for sex is still a crime, even if it turns out the minor is really an adult posing as a child.
He had to stop at the bank first.
While some in law enforcement strongly oppose any civilian group conducting sting operations, Perverted Justice volunteers say they are often able to provide authorities, from local police to the FBI, evidence to build cases and get convictions.
At this point in taping, we have 30 convictions.
30 convictions?
30. We've had, I believe now, 22 since the first of this year. So we're averaging well over 2 a month.
So how do Perverted Justice operatives find potential sexual predators? First, they go into chat rooms, usually through AOL or Yahoo, and set up a profile of a 12, 13, or 14-year-old. A profile that often includes a photo of a child obviously underage, like this one provided by the girl's mother. Then the decoys wait to be contacted by an adult. In order to avoid the appearance of entrapment, they never make the first contact. But once a chat begins, the undercover operatives make it known they're open to the possibility of sex. A few decoys even seem eager.
How quickly do these conversations turn sexual?
Sometimes very quickly. As soon as the conversation is, hi, my name is, I'm 14 years old or 13 years old, and the gentleman will then say, look at this, and send you a picture or say something else. And that would be the crime right there.
While just setting up a liaison online for sex with a minor is illegal, a face-to-face meeting obviously poses a much greater danger. We wanted to know if most predators were all talk, or if they would really attempt to meet a child in person.
Thank you for coming all this way.
We're set up in this upscale home in a suburb of Washington, D.C. We're ready and waiting for the knock on the door.
When we come back, you might not believe who's come calling. Some try to run, but can they hide?
This lovely home in Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., has become the secret meeting place for potential internet sex predators. It's rigged with 9 hidden cameras, 3 with views outside, 1 pointed at the garage, and 5 inside the house. Several volunteers from Perverted Justice, the group dedicated to catching internet predators, are in chat rooms posing as 12, 13, and 14-year-olds ready to make a date for sex with men they meet online. 39-year-old Frag, his screen name, who's been a Perverted Justice volunteer for more than 2 years, is posing as a 13-year-old girl in a Yahoo chat room set up for Virginia residents. It's a chat room not intended for romantic or sexual conversations.
There's a girl named Kim.
As Dateline cameras roll, the undercover operatives enter chat rooms. They're quickly inundated with adults wanting to talk. Here's a 46-year-old who calls himself the Sphinx 59. He thinks he's talking to a 12-year-old girl named Sarah. It takes him only 4 minutes of chatting online to ask her, "Are you a virgin?" She says she is. And then he asks if she's ever performed oral sex. In this chat, as in many other men's chats, things get much more graphic and disgusting.
As soon as those boundaries are crossed, in a lot of ways, the chat tends to get a lot more explicit very quickly.
This man, VA male 69 2005, who's 28, thinks he's talking to Erin, a 14-year-old. He asks her bra size, if she shaves anything other than her legs, and says there's just something about a teen body.
We'll see if he sends a picture or anything.
In most cases, the men ask for pictures of the young teens and then send pictures of themselves. Sometimes, after the chat turns sexual, the man turns on his webcam and exposes himself. Several men go as far as sending pornographic pictures, hoping to teach the inexperienced child about different sex acts.
I'm just trying to kind of get all the pictures of semi-uniform.
Here in Virginia, as in many other states, it's generally a crime to send children obscene material, even if it turns out the recipient is an adult posing as a child.
He also sent some naked shots of himself.
After chatting online about having sex, the decoy suggests a phone call.
I don't know, because I'm all blushing.
23-year-old Dell puts on her best young girl voice. She needs to verify that the man on the phone is the same man in the chat room.
Bye.
The worst thing about doing verification calls is you have to smile while you're doing them, so it sounds like it in your voice, even if you don't mean it at all.
She can also play the part of a young boy.
Oh, my God. I was like, what?
Once a predator has made it clear he wants sex with a minor and makes a date for the liaison, the crime has already been committed. He doesn't even have to show up. But will he?
Hello? Knock, knock.
The answer is yes. But this man, once he sees me and not a teen, realizes he's made a big mistake and runs for the door.
Hey, how are you? Just come on. Hey, whoa, whoa, whoa. Hey, you're not going to want to do that, I don't think.
Here's another guy who doesn't stay long.
Hey, how are you?
Good, I'd like to sell.
Good. Why don't you have a seat right over here?
No, thank you.
I'd like to ask you some questions.
He makes a beeline out to the garage, barely touches the stairs, and with his arms flailing, runs down the driveway and down the street. Clearly, this man knows he's done something wrong. So does this guy.
I'm sorry, see, this is all myself.
No, I want to talk to you for a minute.
No, I'm sorry.
No, I want to talk to you.
No, I'm sorry.
He also makes a run for it, but he didn't come in a car, so he keeps running and running, presumably back to a bus station, trying desperately to hide his face. It may look funny, but what these men had in mind based on their internet chats was anything but. Most of the online conversations were so explicit, we can't even begin to show you.
Yeah, come on in and sit at the counter. I've got some water and some chips there for you if you want them.
Remember the Sphinx 59? He thinks the girl in the house is a 12-year-old virgin, home alone, and willing to perform oral sex. But like many other men you'll meet, he's in for a big surprise when I walk out. Some think I'm the child's father. Others apparently believe I'm with law enforcement. One thing's certain, none of them knows our hidden cameras are recording their every move, and they'll be appearing on Dateline.
How's it going?
Good, sir.
Good. Why don't you have a seat?
Thank you, sir. Nice seeing you.
What you doing here?
His name is Aladdin. He lied online about his age, saying he was 35. He's really 46. And instead of admitting he came here for a date with a 12-year-old girl, he says he's here to look at real estate.
Yeah, I know that the house is for sale.
Oh, that this house is for sale?
Yes. I heard about it. A friend of mine is.
Aladdin goes on to say that his friend found our house for sale on the internet, and he just came to check it out for him. Later, he decides to come clean.
Why did you really come here?
To see what's her name, Sarah.
Sarah?
Yes.
And you were talking with Sarah online?
Yes.
So all that other stuff in the house and all that, that was all a big fat lie?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know how old Sarah is?
No.
He tries to convince me that the girl, Sarah, is 18, even though his own words tell a different story.
You say you're 35, male, and you say where you're from. She says she's 12. You say, oh, you're real young. You like older men? Depends, I guess. You ask her about her former boyfriends. Did she ever give them oral sex? She says yes. She tells you here that she's 12 years old. What is that number right there? What does that say?
12.
12, yeah. So that 18 thing was a lie as well.
I guess.
Then Aladdin apparently begins to feel faint.
What are you doing?
And lies down on the kitchen floor.
Are you okay?
Yes, yes. Just.
Do you want your water?
A little bit. No, I'm fine.
Our background research reveals that Aladdin is a waiter at a Holiday Inn. He says he's an immigrant from Egypt who became a U.S. citizen 2 years ago.
Why is it appropriate to come to a home where a 12-year-old girl...
He said we can meet, you can come over to my place, you can spend time together.
But does that make it right for you to do it?
No, I feel guilty or I feel bad about it.
You'll hear more from Aladdin a little bit later. First, there are more men headed to our house. Meet VA Male 69 2005. He's the one who said there's just something about a teen body. He's 28 and thinks he's talking to a 14-year-old. He's actually chatting with this 23-year-old from Perverted Justice.
He was by far the worst guy I've ever talked to.
Dozens and dozens of cases
Yes.
you've worked on. What separated him from the run-of-the-mill computer predator?
Bestiality, one word.
He chatted online for more than a week with our decoy and slowly introduced more and more depraved sexual requests. He even says he wants to involve a dog.
As soon as the guy said, hey, maybe I'd want to do this, and he wasn't immediately slapped down, it's testing the waters.
Was this all talk, or would this man actually walk into our kitchen? That's him coming in the door.
How you doing?
How you doing?
Why don't you have a seat right around that stool, please? What's happening?
Not much.
What are you here for?
Just come to talk to him.
Coming to talk to who?
That's it.
Why are you so nervous?
I just got nervous. I was coming to talk to Erin.
How old is Erin?
She didn't tell me.
Try again.
I saw 14.
So you thought it was okay to come here to see a 14-year-old girl?
No, I didn't.
And you say, would you ever try anal? Ouch, that's like it could hurt. Not if done right. You have to be very gentle with that. Quite a Romeo.
I'm a lonely guy. What can I say?
He's more than just a lonely guy. We did a background check on VA Male, and it turns out his real name is Joe Wunderler, an Army sergeant stationed at Fort Belvoir at the Intelligence and Security Command.
I've never done anything. I'm trying to get help with it.
What are you doing to get help?
Seeing a psychiatrist right now.
Well, it doesn't look like it's working too well based upon all this.
I just started talking to him.
I mean, this gets pretty freaky here. You talk about sex acts with a dog.
It's one of the reasons why I'm trying to get help, because I've gotten into fetishes that I know aren't right.
I guess you're going to tell me next that this is the very first time you've done something like this.
Actually, it is. I'm serious.
True or not, remember, this guy tried to entice a young teen into depraved sex acts. It only takes one encounter to harm a child forever. We set aside 3 days to see how many men would actually show up at our undercover house. To keep track of our appointments, we set up a bulletin board. It didn't take long to fill up our calendar.
Total today? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 so far.
Some came bearing gifts like beer, condoms, and a pornographic tape. One man brought shoes and dinner, just what the decoy ordered. You may not think that's significant, but Lieutenant Jake Jacoby, who runs a child services unit here in Virginia, says during undercover stings, it can help get convictions.
At times when they show up, we like to have them either bring us something or do something so we can show that they're doing specifically what we asked them to do.
Shows intent.
It helps, yes.
The men who show up at this house looking for a liaison with a child come from very different backgrounds. And as our investigation unfolds, you might be surprised at just how diverse our group gets. Some hold very prominent positions, more prominent than you'd ever imagine.
What do you do for a living?
When we come back, the parade continues. More men knocking on the door, more on who they are, and more than a few questions for this man.
Could you explain yourself?
From stalking the chat rooms to knocking on the door, Dateline's hidden cameras have caught a string of men in the act, showing up for a date with a minor they thought was home alone. But you might be surprised at the men arriving next. Again, we want to remind you that some of what you're about to see is sexually explicit. Here's Chris Hansen.
During our investigation, there's a parade of men walking up the driveway, through the garage, and into the house. 19 men in 3 days. In almost every case, the man engaged in sexually explicit internet conversations with a person posing as a young teen. And as you'll hear later, most of them said they'd never done it before and would never actually have sex with a minor.
Did you bring beer?
No, I think we can stop and get some on the way.
And perhaps more shocking than the number of men is who they are. Our background checks uncover men leading double lives, men you would never suspect involved in this potentially illegal activity. This man letting himself into our house makes his living working with children. He's a special education teacher. Dell is now posing as a boy the man's expecting to meet.
Just sit at the kitchen counter for a minute.
Where are you? Oh, okay.
I need to get my new shorts on.
Okay.
The teacher, Stephen Benoff, believes he's been chatting online about sex with a boy named Brandon who says he's 13. And how old do you think the teacher is? He's 54 and married. When I confront him, at first he says he thought Brandon was an adult.
Well, you said he was 23. What's the problem?
I have the transcript. That's what the problem is. Brandon said he was 13.
13?
13.
And the teacher knows this because Brandon told him online he was 13.
You can talk about oral sex, anal sex, and all the different things that you'd like to do with him. What are you doing here?
I thought I would come see him, but...
Come see him for what?
I wanted to meet him.
While online, our 13-year-old decoy asked the teacher to bring condoms. Did he?
Mm-hmm.
You did? You have them in your pocket?
Mm-hmm.
What does that say about your intent?
Well, I always have them with me, but...
What is a 54-year-old man doing coming to this home to see a 13-year-old boy?
I obviously made a big mistake.
And he wasn't the only one, not by a long shot. Surprisingly, there were many men with impressive resumes, men you would consider trustworthy. You'll never guess what this man, screen name GBABBNSP, does for a living.
Come on in, I just spilled Diet Coke all over my shorts.
He's an emergency room doctor.
Shake them.
Dr. Jeffrey Beck, a 50-year-old, is here to meet a boy he thinks is 14.
I'll be right back down then. It's all right.
Watch how he tries to follow our decoy upstairs.
I can go up if you want.
When I confront the doctor, he says he had no intention of having sex with the boy. He only came here because he felt badly for the teen who was left home alone.
He was so anxious to have some company when he was left by himself for 4 days, but under circumstances it sounded neglectful.
So you're the Good Samaritan?
That's correct.
During his online chat, the doctor was not as sexually explicit as many of the others who showed up. In fact, after we read to you part of the chat, you'll see he seemed to choose his words carefully.
I'd like very much to be your friend. I don't think I even want to have sex with you until you're old enough for both of us not to get in trouble over it. Lots more to friendship than sex, for sure.
I would not tell. I'd done it before.
Once we know each other well, whatever happens, happens, but I won't meet you for sex.
But he does suggest getting physical. After talking about covering the teen with hugs and kisses, the 50-year-old says to the decoy who he thinks is 14, "I want to cuddle you." and make you feel safe and loved and cared about.
Experts in this field say that kind of a discussion is consistent with somebody who's grooming a young boy for sex. You see what I'm getting at?
Mm-hmm.
What's really going on here?
What's really going on was I came over to take him out for lunch.
You ask, have you ever been spanked? He says, by my dad, but not for sex.
Mm-hmm.
You say, could it be fun for sex? He says, I can try. You say, want to spank a dad. Now you see how that looks.
Yeah, it looks pretty bad.
The doctor maintains he would never do anything illegal, but acknowledges a meeting like this could appear inappropriate.
Now, if you had a teenage son who was home alone, would you be comfortable with a 50-some-year-old man coming into the house for a visit?
I suppose it would depend on the 50-year-old man, but in general, no, I wouldn't.
What about this guy? A man in his position is just about the last person you'd expect to be showing up at our house. It's 4 o'clock in the morning in an AOL chat room. This 54-year-old man, screen named Red BD, messages a 13-year-old boy named Conrad saying, I'm prowling for young men. What he goes on to say, and the pictures he sends are so graphic, we had to carefully edit them before putting them on television. And as you'll hear when we read from his chat log, it's clear Red BD knows what he's doing is wrong.
You're only 13?
Yeah.
That's rape.
Dude, I tell you that before.
Yes, I remember.
Oh, okay.
Just you're so young. I've never been with a young man like you, but I would like to.
While the two are chatting online, we conduct a background check and are absolutely shocked by what this man does for a living. And now he's in our kitchen after making a date for sex with a boy he thinks is 13.
Hello?
Hi.
Hey, hold 1 second. I gotta change my shirt, okay?
Okay.
It's still day. I gotta ask, you still gonna be up for tonight?
We'll see.
So how can I help you? What are you doing here?
Not something good. This isn't good.
Not good? I think that's kind of an understatement, isn't it? What do you do for a living?
A rabbi.
That's right, a rabbi. The man who sent naked pictures of himself is a man of God. He's a staff member at a Jewish youth educational organization.
Now, presumably, you counsel families and children in your position as a rabbi. What are you doing as a man of God, as a rabbi, in this house, trying to meet a 13-year-old boy?
Instead of answering, the rabbi asks to know who I am. But before I tell him, I want to ask him about those pictures he sent.
And you sent pornographic pictures. That's a federal offense right there.
Okay, look. You know I'm in trouble, and I know I'm in trouble. I am not interested in getting any further in trouble.
Then we heard that familiar excuse.
This is not something that I've done ever.
You've never done this before. You know, because I hear that a lot.
You'll hear more from the rabbi later. Others are on the way. Here comes Special Guy 29. Earlier online, he told our decoy, who was posing as a 14-year-old boy, that he's an 11th grade English teacher. Then he told the boy that he hates condoms, but he's safe. Our decoy asks Special Guy 29 to bring beer and then throws in a request, a technique often used by law enforcement to illustrate intent. He types, "Side garage is open. Strip to your underwear and come in. I be in mine." The man says, "I don't wear underwear." So the decoy says, "Then come in naked." We never thought he'd really do it, but we were wrong. After casing our house, walking up and down the street, here he comes with the beer. And you can guess what he does in the garage.
Could you explain yourself?
I'm sorry.
Why don't you go ahead and cover up?
Certainly. I'm sorry.
The man's name is John Kennelly. He tells me he's 29 and a bus driver. Then he changes it to a teacher.
What kind of conduct is this for a high school teacher?
No, sir, I've never done this before.
So you just woke up this morning and said, I'm going to get involved in an internet conversation with a 14-year-old boy. I'm going to go to his house, strip naked, and walk in with a 12-pack of beer.
No, sir.
What would have happened, John, if I wasn't here?
I probably would have chickened out, sir.
After doing a deeper background check on him, we find out he's neither a teacher nor a bus driver. His father says he's unemployed, and he's not 29. He's actually 43.
Do you know that it's illegal to have a conversation on the internet with the intent to have sex with a minor?
Yes, sir, I do.
He says he knows it's illegal, but it appears that's not enough to deter him. Whether he needs psychiatric help or the hand of the law, he still might pose a threat to a child. Stick around and wait till you see what he does next.
This is the identical screen
name online. This morning he changed nothing.
Like the men you've met so far, you're about to see others who are quick to come up with a story when confronted by an adult. But what will they say when they find out they're going to appear on national television?
Oh, no. Come on, guy.
You'll see that confrontation when we come back. And what would drive a rabbi or anyone to this kind of behavior? We'll shed some light on that coming up.
Most guys don't go on the internet and say, you know, I'm going to decide to ruin my life today. They're being driven and they can't stop.
Men from all over Virginia, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. arrived at this house after chatting about sex, thinking they were meeting a 12, 13, or 14-year-old who was home alone. 19 men in 3 days, from the down and out to pillars of the community.
I teach school.
What classes do you teach?
Special education.
As the men approached our undercover house, hidden cameras rolled and kept rolling as I startled them and started asking questions. Just about every one of them gave me the same story.
So this is the first time?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I hear a lot of them.
Yeah, well, it's true.
I've never visited a teenage boy before in my life.
First time in my life. Has this happened to me?
First time?
Yes, sir. So I've never done this before.
And some came up with more creative excuses.
She said she was 13, that's why I was concerned she was going to be by herself. So I was going to stop and talk to her.
So you're just being a good Samaritan?
Yeah.
Because there was a 13-year-old girl
by herself.
Home alone?
Yeah.
Right. And so out of the goodness of your heart, you were going to stop by?
Yeah, it could be anybody.
And babysitter, is that the deal?
Well, sort of, I guess. We can order some pizza and maybe watch a movie or something.
This guy named Jonas says it's all a case of mistaken identity.
It's not me. I assure you.
So let me get this straight. So there's another guy whose name is Jonas, right? Who happens to look like you and have the same cell phone number as you, and he has the dirty conversation about sex with a 12-year-old girl, but you didn't. But you end up showing up here anyway.
I don't know about that person.
Just about every man who walked into our house said he really wasn't planning on having sex with a minor, but we'll never know what would have happened had we not been there. Still, none of what we heard surprises Lieutenant Jacoby of the Fairfax County Police Department here in Virginia. He says he's heard it all before.
I've never done this before.
We've heard that one. That's usually probably not true.
I'm here to protect them.
That's probably one of the biggest ones that we get also.
I didn't think I was actually talking to a minor.
Again, that's something that we've heard quite often from people.
How often do you suppose we're being lied to when we hear those excuses?
Usually about 100% of the time.
So why would a man with so much to lose risk everything to meet a child for sex? Dr. David Marcus, a clinical psychologist who treats men with sexual compulsions, says it's a powerful addiction.
They don't know what's driving them. All they know is they're being driven and they can't stop. And to risk themselves so greatly clearly shows how powerful a ride that is.
Listen, I have had a problem with an internet addiction talking to females.
Most guys don't go on the internet and say, you know, I'm going to decide to ruin my life today. Most guys go on and say, I need something to make myself feel better. And they're not conscious of what they're doing.
And Dr. Marcus says there are different reasons men choose to meet children for sex.
Some, and this may be a minority, have a primary attraction to that age group. Others are more looking for a situation where they could feel powerful, where they can, again, explore parts of themselves, try to do things in a situation where there is a power differential.
Whatever power they thought they had, it's lost as soon as they see me. And now they're about to learn I'm not a parent or the police. First, the rabbi.
Could you please tell me who you are?
I'm more than happy to tell you who I am. I am Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC, and we're doing a story on computer predators.
No, come on, guy.
You don't want to touch it. You don't want it.
You've got to stop this.
Sit down. Sit down.
You don't have any right.
You're free to leave anytime.
Now they knew this was all being taped for the record and for broadcast on Dateline. The doctor.
But if there's anything else you want to say.
Nothing.
The teacher.
And if there's anything else you'd like to say, we'd like to hear it.
And the man who stood naked in our kitchen.
Thank you. I don't have anything else to say.
So what happens now? As they always do with law enforcement, Frag and Dell, the volunteers from Perverted Justice, have turned over all of their online evidence, from the pornographic photos to the online chats, to Lieutenant Jacoby and his child sex crimes unit at the Fairfax County Police Department.
We are actively looking at some of these cases.
Lieutenant Jacoby says it'll be a while before we know if criminal charges will be pursued. His department did notify school officials about the teacher, and Benoff was fired. Since some of the men were in the Army and Navy, Dell contacted the military, and Dateline was told that those men are under investigation. Perverted Justice intends to put the men's pictures and entire chat logs, including their phone numbers, on pervertedjustice.com.
We let the citizens, we have over 20,000 members now in our forums, do their work, which whatever they want to do, a lot of them will contact whoever's associated with that person.
Usually that means the man's employer, relatives, and neighbors. Members will direct them to the chat logs and other evidence on Perverted Justice's website, hoping to keep men like these from harming children. You might think being caught on tape would be enough to deter these men from ever entering a chat room again. Maybe not. Wait till you see what Special Guy 29 is up to next.
How can we be certain that this guy in this chat room is the same guy who walked into this house last night naked?
Coming up, how big a threat internet predators really are. And later, how you can keep your kids safe.
Do you ever think to yourself, I can't believe how many of these people are out there?
It's overwhelming at times.
I don't have anything else to say.
Take the towel to the garage.
You might think that this 43-year-old man who walked into our house naked, ready to meet a 14-year-old boy for sex, would be so humiliated after being caught literally with his pants down that he'd never try it again. Yet we find him right back online, in a chat room, the very next day.
How can we be certain that this guy in this chat room is the same guy who walked into this house last night naked?
It's the same screen name.
Same identical screen name. He got busted on Special Guy 29.
He's changed nothing.
He's spotted by a Perverted Justice volunteer who's posing as a 13-year-old boy.
He just checked the kid's pic.
Even these Perverted Justice veterans find what's happening hard to believe.
If he keeps talking, then that's just gonna be beyond comprehension.
Yet he does keep talking. And again, the chat quickly turns sexual. And believe it or not, again, he agrees to yet another date for sex. Our decoy asks if he wants to meet at McDonald's.
What do you suppose the odds are that a guy like that would agree to another meeting?
I would have said 0 last night after watching what happened.
Well, Special Guy 29 defies the odds and agrees to meet. But first, he confirms the meeting is not about food.
He really wanted to make sure it was about sex.
Sure enough, here he comes headed towards the McDonald's.
I have been in television for 24 years.
I just came to get something to eat.
And I have very seldom been at a loss for words.
Sir, I just came to get something to eat.
But I don't even know what to ask you first.
I just came to get something to eat.
He later changes his story.
Last night, you walk into a house in suburban Washington, naked, with a 12-pack of beer, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Today, you're on the internet again. You have an inappropriate conversation with a boy you think is 13, and you set up a meeting here at this fast food restaurant. What was your intention?
I don't know.
The man admits he knows what he's doing is illegal.
Then why do you do it?
That I need help, and that's what I'm seeing a psychiatrist for.
As incredible as this looks, that a man would do this twice in 2 days, Lieutenant Jacoby isn't all that surprised.
Don't these people know that this is illegal and that very possibly they could be talking to a decoy or getting pulled into some sort of undercover investigation?
Well, if you look at the internet and the amount of people who are soliciting these types of crimes, your chances of getting caught are probably fairly slim.
Maybe that's why so many of the men who visited our house walked in so confidently, almost like they owned the place. Remember Rabbi David Kay?
We'll see.
Despite his actions caught on hidden camera and his graphic internet exchange, Rabbi Kay called us several times, claiming he did nothing wrong. However, earlier this week, he resigned his staff position, informing his employer he was going to be featured in this Dateline story. He also had no comment about this picture Dateline found while investigating the rabbi's background. It shows Kay in a group photo, including 2 other rabbis caught and convicted of soliciting a child for sex on the internet.
Do you ever think to yourself, I can't believe how many of these people are out there?
It's overwhelming at times.
In the end, most experts agree it's really up to parents to keep children safe from online predators.
If you could give parents one single piece of advice, what would it be?
What can parents do? Some tips on keeping your kids out of harm's way when we come back.
Hour of Sunday on NBC.
Every day, online predators make their way into homes uninvited and unnoticed.
This public service announcement alerts parents that online predators are a very real danger and advises them to get educated.
If the technology is in your house, it's a parent's responsibility to protect their child.
Michelle Collins from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children says the problem is so widespread, your child could be a victim and you may not even know it.
If there are phone calls arriving at your house that you don't know the person on the other end of the line, is your child or teenager receiving gifts? Do they have a webcam in their room that you didn't buy?
These are all warning signs.
These are all things that happen quite frequently in the many cases that we view and that we work with law enforcement on.
Collins says it's important for all of us parents to make certain computers are in open areas of our homes, not in kids' bedrooms. We should know who our children are talking to online and closely monitor their use of webcams.
The problem we've been seeing recently, webcams. Many kids are finding themselves in problematic situations after having used a webcam. A combination of too much privacy, too much technology, at a sexually curious age can really spell a disaster.
Child safety experts agree it's important for parents to take advantage of parental controls offered by internet providers and use one of the many protective software programs currently available. And Collins has one other piece of advice.
One single most important, most basic piece of advice to give parents is to keep the communication lines open with your kids. If something happens online, it's more important that an adult find out about it than the child try to handle it on their own, because those cases don't always end well.
You know, and I think most kids know not to talk to strangers and don't if they're approached in public. But when they're online, they're in the safety of their home, and sometimes they let their guard down, and that's all a potential predator needs to kind of get that foot in the door and kind of establish a relationship.
It's so frightening, Stone. And also I think that we have this idea that, you know, the people to be afraid of are going to look like bad guys. And in fact, what we've just seen is they can look like your next door neighbor, your rabbi.
Chris Hansen has been blogging on our website the past few days, and we've received some emails, one of them coming from somebody who says that they work in evaluating and training sexual predators, and says they come from all walks of life and can look like your next door neighbor.
Well, it's important for parents now to be especially diligent.
It is. You can read Chris's blog, send him an email, and get more information on protecting kids from cyber predators on our website. The address is dateline.msnbc.com.
Yeah, that was the sting. All the stuff I talked about in the pre-sting section, it's all true. But it's also true that the end result hour-long episode was stellar. Kay, Kennelly, Benoff, and Wonderler especially were just a slap in the face to the country, all for different reasons. The show didn't even higher rating an audience than the first one did. NBC News was so over the moon about it that it almost immediately re-airs on MSNBC in a high-profile time slot on the next Friday night. My friend Phoebus, myself, and a couple other technical-minded fellows spend over 24 hours tracking down queries on the forums causing us timeout. We eventually, on the 5th, get it drilled down enough to keep almost everything up and running, despite the crazy amount of hits and traffic that we were getting from the show. Again, to stress, we had no real financial resources, so to be able to keep the website up at all during this airing was hardcore, painstaking work. Servers back then aren't like they are in 2025 as of my recording this video. That we kept things up at all, at any point, was a minor miracle. Craig is still our point contact with Lynn Keller of Dateline, and he dropped this note that you can currently see on screen regarding internal Dateline feedback on the episode. He somewhat misjudges the feeling in the contributor area about our appetite to do a third Dateline without major changes. The idea that the only thing that could be improved on was picture sourcing did not go over great with our volunteers or myself. Also, remember the picture thing too. That becomes important when Riverside rolls around. Foreshadowing. What Frag doesn't twig yet is that we're not doing another sting like Herndon. That's not a criticism of Frag. He was great. You won't ever hear me insult or criticize him in any serious way, other than to say at this juncture in time, he's too much in the play-along, get-along side of things with Dateline. What he doesn't know, and the contributors in general don't know, is that there will be another Dateline without police. I won't agree to it. The site would have had to fracture apart first, or they would have had to find a way to put cement shoes on my feet, dump my ass into the Hudson River, before the site would agree to another sting like Virginia. I know at this point in time that I have most of the contributors lined up behind me on that stance as well, as the medley of replies on screen are just a sampling of how our chat decoy volunteers felt about the idea of doing another sting like Virginia. It was not going to happen. Frag and Dell would have had to peel off and create their own website to do another sting with Dateline without law enforcement being involved. I would have rather set perverted justice on fire than do this again the way Dateline had it set up with Virginia. You thought I was spouting hyperbole in the first part of the video when I went on for 30 paragraphs? Nah, son. Nah. The explanation of how Dateline 3 in Riverside comes to pass will be covered in a future supplemental about the Riverside sting itself. As an abject teaser, it's a brawl behind the scenes of Dateline. Brawl. And with law enforcement agreeing to do the sting, Dateline finds out the reality of just how much things had changed when it came to them telling us word boo about who to send and what to do. I strike back hard, and the play-along, get told what to do bullshit of this Virginia sting ends definitively at that point. Dell dropped a note on screen here about the absurd amount of replays this sting gets on MSNBC. It wasn't just that we did big numbers on the original airing on Dateline NBC, but we were killing it on MSNBC as well. Look at the absurd amount of replays. And Dell wasn't blowing smoke about beating everything on cable when it airs on MSNBC. The show would go on to continue that trend, doing numbers on MSNBC that they just didn't see for any other programming in that era. It's one thing to look at our crazy numbers on NBC itself, it's another to add in all the additional millions that watched it on MSNBC replays. That's the kind of awareness of a problem that you can't put a price tag on. The amount of legislation and funding that went to cybercrime drew to this sting's success cannot be tabulated. It was a game changer. That's part one of the look at the Herndon, Virginia Dateline sting. This part focused almost entirely on our relationship with Dateline both pre and post the second Dateline sting. Hopefully, there were some things in there that you didn't know and found interesting. I think a lot of people who saw the episode just look at it and go, oh yeah, they got a house and had guys show up. How easy. Don't think it's quite appreciated or known just how much work went into these things behind the scenes when it came to the work of our organization. On my 9th supplemental video, we're going to be taking a look at the other side of the Herndon sting. The individuals who showed up and were featured on the show. The behind-the-scenes stories about them. The individuals that showed up and weren't featured on the show. The individuals that were scheduled and no-showed us, and the types of guys we were told not to send to the house, or who didn't meet Dateline's criteria to show up to the house. Then a look at the other part of the fight. The bigger fight. The one with law enforcement in Fairfax County, who tried to sandbag us, who we literally had to go to the mats against in the media, and via a letter-writing campaign to get them to pick up some of the guys in their county that had shown up to the house. Imagine seeing the two rivals of John Kennelly and saying to yourself, nah, we won't bother. As well, it will be a long look at the David K. federal prosecution, the prosecution of Joe Wunderler, and the end result of the guys we couldn't get picked up by law enforcement. When I said at the start of this video that everything was a friggin' fight, and none of it needed to be, part 2 will be the best example of just how true that statement is. Until then, I'm Xavier Von Erck. Thanks for watching.
I heard like a walkie-talkie and then I saw a white shirt. I swear to God, I thought I saw something. You didn't hear that walkie-talkie sound. You're really just like by yourself. It's so weird that you have a corner house right on the corner by itself. You have a neighbor, this old guy, and he's like, at your back door. He like hung around by this fence that was open. Then there's this car that's following me that I'm trying to lose. And now he pulls over with me, I don't get that. Where's he going? Parked and then turned away. I don't get that. You are young, you know what I mean? I'm just paranoid. I'm just so iffy. Let me just ask you some serious questions, okay? Because I just have to. You don't have anything to do with any kind of police or cop or anything like that, right? At all? Yeah, but I'm scared too. All right, I'll come to the door. Oh no! Fruit Loops, I just finished them. Wish I had another bowl of cereal. Do you have cereal? Frosted Flakes, so awesome. Could have just ate some more cereal, but wanted her to fall asleep with my dick in. Really should have just ate a lot more cereal. A walkie-talkie, an old guy, and an undercover car were not enough. Could have turned around and got another bowl of cereal, but nah, a tutorial on how to get tased and piss yourself. Top, 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 and piss. Ain't nobody ever get tempted eating a bowl of cereal. Top, 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 and piss, 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 piss. Just don't try to drive a car while doing so. Top, 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 and piss. This is good advice about cereal. Some wisdom for you, my friend. When you've got two options, and one is just eating cereal. Stay home and eat the cereal. Frosted Flakes, so great that they don't float. Cinnamon Toast Crunch makes a tasty cinnamon milk. Lucky Charms, tasty little marshmallows, yum. Cocoa Pebbles, the best chocolate flavor after Cookie Crisp. Little chocolate chip cookies, yeah. Cheerios. Wait, nah, fuck Cheerios. But they're all better than 13-year-olds. Because you don't end up being tased and pissing yourself on national TV like a fucking butt munch when you could have stayed home and ate Captain Crunch. Zop, 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 and piss. Ain't nobody ever get tased eating a bowl of cereal. Zop, 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 and piss. Just don't try to drive a car while doing so. Zop, 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 zop. This is good advice about cereal. Good advice about cereal. long friggin' fight, distilled down to a line. Monsters like horror movie villains, inspired by when we did nothing close to that. Any kind of cruelty and brutality, so wonder why a reporter of healthy body and sound mind could start an article with an egregious lie. Don't recall electrocuting anyone, nor a kidnap, nor a fucking ransom. No social media mugging, no criminal thugging, just arrests across the country, no cutting. Zero torture cases, not even an abrasion. Yet 15 years later, another media invention. One thing you're not supposed to say: I'm bitter today, and that's okay. Being a voyeur, watching the world decay. Little but morons everywhere to my dismay. Dudes didn't learn shit from our heyday. I'm bitter today, and that's okay. Bunch of retards on a bougie college campus, harassing a guy for hitting on an 18-year-old. Lie and say we were all so that dumb and callous, like the guys we got arrested were ever told that we were anything but a minor status. 15, the oldest. Another media lie so bold. Don't think I was intended to live this long. After we got done finishing our last song, 10 years after, still seeing it got so wrong. That's the problem of doing things so young. Linger on to see all the shit that's flung in a world mostly filled with dumb human dung. I'm bitter today, and that's okay. The legacy of your work, and you have no say. New guys getting arrested, nah, they'd rather pray. New ones from the media, there's no way. Examples of the differences never on display. I'm bitter today, and that's okay.